All right, welcome back. Recording live. This is Anatomy and Physiology with your professor, Dr. Sean Clavel. This is the entrance into week 9 of the semester here, ladies and gentlemen. We've made it past the halfway point. The biggest item on our agenda here after this week is our exam number 4, not number 3. Let me fix that real fast. Exam number 4, that is. We'll be looking at the context of that. So for my online class that'll open up hopefully tonight, I'm just finishing up the last parts of that, and it will be due on Tuesday, October the 15th. So you can see here, just like our previous exam, we're going to have 2 parts to this one here. There is a multiple choice section, so it's going to go over chapters 6, 7, and 8, right? So chapter 6, bone as a tissue and kind of bone, the skeletal system, the major concepts of the skeletal system. Chapter 7, chapter 8, we're looking at the appendicular and axial skeleton, so all of the bones of the body as well as some of their special features. And so the exam will comprise of all those, chapters 6, 7, and 8. And as you can see here, it's chapter 2 parts. The first part will be our multiple choice answer questions here. There's going to be about 80 questions this time. It will be more weighted to chapter 6. So more than half of these questions will be chapter 6. The rest of them will pertain to chapters 7 and 8 combined, right? So more than half is going to be chapter 6. The rest will be chapter 7, chapters 8. And each of those questions will will come up for about, let me make sure that's right here, 1.25 for a total of 100 points. So I got my calculator here just to make sure that these numbers come up right. Yep, 100 points for the multiple choice or the lecture component of the exam, and then we have the practicals. So these practical questions comprise 40, 50. I'm still finishing out. It'll probably be lean somewhere in between here, and it will have those short answers. You'll get a picture. Some of them might be some multiple choice, but you'll get a picture of a bone or histological. So you might see some chapter 6 material, whether it is the histology of bone or cartilage, which is a very closely aligned to bone in the skeletal system here. So we'll be looking at those things, but also primarily looking at the different bones of the body and their special features, their landmarks, as I might call them, bony landmarks. So identifying those, getting familiar with those, and so when you do so, you want to identify not only what landmark it is, but what bone are we looking at as well. So the greater trochanter of the femur is probably the best answer that you might want to say, right? So give me the feature, right, the greater trochanter, and then tell me what bone that it sits upon as well, and that's going to be the most complete answer for full credit. And again, you'll see there that there's about, well, I guess 1 to 1.5 1 to 1.25 points each. That's going to come out to a total of 50 points. So the hard number here is 50 points. It's definitely going to be 50 points worth of practical questions. There will be 100 points worth of multiple choice questions in this thing. All right. And so just to give you a quick review about Chapter 6. Remember, Chapter 6, we talked about the functions of the skeletal system. So the functions of the skeletal system includes support and facilitation of movement. It provides protection, the storage of minerals, as well as some fat in the medullary cavity in the form of yellow bone marrow. And then the last one here, the blood cell production, also referred to as hematopoiesis. There is the classification of bones. So we classify bones on their location and their shape. Let me fix that a little bit. And so there can be long bones, there can be flat bones, there can be irregular bones, and what's the one I'm not thinking about? Sesamoid bones is another one as well. So looking at those classifications of the bones. As well, you'll see that there are different structures to the bone, whether it is a long bone or a flat bone. So if we click here into our next slide, the structure of a bone is a little bit different, maybe even a little bit more complex in a long bone. So long bones that are related to your arms and legs, they have two ends called the epiphyses. There's a long diaphyseal region, which is the shaft of the bone, and then there's a metaphysis where we often see the growth plate, and other regions as well. And so the structure of a long bone is a little bit more complex. There's a dense outer connective tissue covering. There's a more gentle connective tissue covering on the inside. And so what are those structures called? We're going to be important to identify. And then the microscopic, that's kind of the gross anatomy of a bone. Microscopic anatomy of the bone is related to things like the osteon, right? Remember the osteon. What is the structure of the osteon? Where's that little canal in the center? All of the osteocytes around it. Bone markings, as we've mentioned here, like there's features, fossas, tubercles. They all have a special, their name inferences what type of feature that you're looking for. So like a tubercle is a bump or a roughened region. The same thing with like a condyle. That's a rounded region that bones are going to articulate. So fossa is a basin or like a little groove, whereas a foramen might be, or a foramen is a small hole where a nerve often comes out. So identifying these bone markings, being able to identify what that we're looking at is going to be helpful as well. And then finally, the bone formation and growth. So the bones form by two different ways while we're in utero, while we're in the developmental stages in our mom's belly, right? What happens is that the bones below our collarbone, the bones of our neck and arms, the bones below our neck, our arms and legs, are developed via a hyaline cartilage model. So hyaline cartilage starts the model in which our bones are created for the arms, legs, and most of the skeleton. Whereas the bones of my skull are developed by the term is intramembraneous ossification, but the dense fibrous connective tissue model is what it is versus the hyaline cartilage that we mentioned with endochondral ossification, as it's referred to. So those are the big ones, and then finally some things that could go wrong. So we talked about some fractures and vitamin D we talked about fractures here in the lecture. We talked about vitamin D in chapters 5 when we talked about the integumentary system, because it is endogenously, meaning it's created inside of our body, and vitamin D is stimulated by production is stimulated by the sun. UV radiation to the sun stimulates vitamin D production. That vitamin D is a co-transporter in the small intestine to get calcium out of the intestine and into the bloodstream, where it can then be concentrated to the areas that it's needed. And then when it comes to chapters 7 and 8, again, we're just going to be looking primarily at these different bones of the body. So again, I would reference you guys to I'll just pill one here. To the parts of the vertebrae, or the parts, again, knowing the different parts and pieces, and particularly kind of the handout that I gave you. So let me see here. Chapters 7, chapters 8 are really going to be pertaining to kind of these pictures, right? So being able to identify the different features, whether it is the the optic canal, the supraorbital fissure, the inferior orbital fissure, the mastoid process, being able to identify all of these features, whether it is again or a vertebrae, right? If it is a elbow, so identifying the different components here, whether you've got the trochlear notch, let's do this, the humerus, right? So identifying all the different parts of each of these bones is going to be the important aspect of it. So I encourage you guys to practice, go over those study guides that I gave you guys as homework, and just really kind of practice these, because these are the pictures that you'll be seeing here in the practical, identifying the different parts of the bone. Okay, and then from there, we'll be moving on to joints, so looking at the different articulation points where the bones meet, and then getting into movement, so the different movements of the body, ab and adduction, flexion, extension, internal and external rotation. These are all components that we'll be talking about in the next chapters here. And then the muscles that move the body, so the physiology of muscle, one of the most dynamic tissues in the human body, as well as the locations of those muscles. So getting familiar with where they start, where they stop. But that's all I'm going to keep you guys here for now. I encourage you guys to keep up the good hard work as you continue on in through the semester here. I will see you guys next week, but until then, I look forward to all your responses here throughout the next assessment.